There's this concept that Aristotle wrote about called receptivity, and modern behaviorists call it cognitive ease. And if you're smiling, you're more persuadable. So saying something stupid can make you smile, even if it's an embarrassed smile, and that actually kind of changes the brain and makes you more receptive to new information or new ideas.
That's Jay Heinrichs. He spent 26 years as a writer, editor, and publishing executive before dedicating himself to the lost art of rhetoric. Now he lectures and writes widely on the subject. His most recent book is Aristotle's Guide to Self-Persuasion: How Ancient Rhetoric, Taylor Swift, and Your Own Soul Can Help You Change Your Life. So you'll learn 1, Aristotle's lure and ramp method for making progress. 2, why to make your affirmations as silly as possible. And 3, powerful reframes for failure and impostor syndrome. And if you want a quick summary recap of the actionable wisdom that Jay shared, please sign up for the free Gold Nugget email newsletter found at awesomeatyourjob.com. I'm Pete Mockaitis. This is How to Be Awesome at Your Job. And now, here's Jay. Jay, welcome.
Thanks, Pete.
Or I should say, welcome back. It's been 9 years and I'm still podcasting. You're still talking about persuasion. So here we are.
You don't look a day older.
Oh, you're too kind. I'm sure that's not true. 3 kids and more have materialized in the intervening period. But I'm excited to chat about your latest work, Aristotle's Guide to Self-Persuasion. And yeah, I think that really resonates because I think many of us find ourselves wishing we were more persuasive with ourselves to get to the gym or any number of things. Could you share with us perhaps one of the most surprising discoveries you've made about us humans and self-persuasion over your years of researching this stuff?
Yeah, I was really stuck with this because rhetoric, which is my beat, as you know, the art of persuasion, it has to do with manipulating other people without their knowing it. Essentially, it's a dark art. So, and what do you do when the audience, as we say in rhetoric, is your own lame, not gym-going self? So I was kind of stuck in life some years ago when my wife said, why don't you apply all those cool tools of persuasion on yourself? She was thinking maybe this would put me in a better mood and get me in better shape and all that good stuff. And I said, well, you can't do that with yourself. But my wife is really smart. I do everything she says. So I went back and did a deep dive in Aristotle, who has been, who wrote the original book on rhetoric, as you know, and discovered a book I hadn't read by him, crazily called On the Soul. And I say that's crazy because his idea of the soul is nothing like what we hear about in church or temple. It has to do with like your most noble self, the person you wished you saw in the mirror. And Aristotle actually thought that might even be an organ in your body. A later philosopher said, he found it. He said, your soul is located within your pituitary gland. So now you know. But so
Okay.
the fact that that soul, if I could really understand what that meant and then convert that soul into the audience, the person I was trying to convince, I was better than it seemed to be, then maybe that was a way I could persuade myself. And it led to a really, really interesting year in particular where I experimented on myself.
Well, that's very intriguing indeed. So, okay, well, we just can't let it lie. How's the soul in the pituitary gland now?
Well, I think it has to do with things that sort of trigger your motivation. But I am no biologist, and the guy who said that was René Descartes, who lived a long time ago. So I'm not sure he knew either.
Okay, gotcha. But in a way, I think there's some wisdom to that, and that which we naturally, intrinsically find delightful or dreadful has a tremendous steering force into the shape of our destiny.
No question about it. The other thing is what we feel ashamed of, and that long-term shame we call guilt. That it stops us from things. Also, our sense of identity, like who we are. It's funny because I brag about how good I am at napping all the time. I'm a champion napper. And when I tell people that, after they get past that big napping ego of mine, they invariably say, I'm not a napper or I don't nap. And it's a way of saying I am, my soul doesn't nap. I am not the kind of person who naps. That's an identity thing. And so by getting in touch with the part of you that's not screwing up daily, but actually is someone who would be meeting your goals, your best self, you actually can, by trying to convince your soul that you actually are a napper, you become a better napper. Your identity actually can change a little bit. So yeah, you're right. It's what we feel good about or what we feel bad about. But more than that, it's sort of what satisfies us the most, what's most important to us. Now, not to drone on too much about this, but this is what we're talking about. One of the ways to detect who that soul is, who you really are deep down, is to plan your next vacation, which is super fun. And vacation, like your dream vacation, is the kind of place people already go. I mean, I talk in the book about the Mona Lisa. You go into the Louvre and it's in a room and everybody's jumping up and down, holding their phones up so they can record the moment. What are they doing? It's actually kind of a small picture. You can't really see it all that well. It's better to go online and see it. Why are people doing that? It's because that's what's expected of them, what they think a good educational vacation must be. That's hearing from other people and not from your truest self. So if you think about the things that you would really love to do that other people don't, that's not prestigious, that doesn't make a good Instagram photo, that's what your soul is telling you. And that's one of the ways you can detect what that soul is, according to Aristotle.
Yeah, that's a good one. Or I'm thinking about when people sort of self-deprecatingly refer to themselves as a total nerd or dork for such and such a thing. I think that's actually profoundly insightful in terms of, yes, you recognize that this thing that does not delight the vast majority of humans intensely delights you. So go for it. If you're a nerd or a dork for productivity or for the gym or for process optimization or for airline baggage processing. I know someone like that. I mean, that's awesome. Like, lean into that.
I think I wish I'd written that in my book. That is a great way to put it. This idea where if somebody is saying, I'm unless they're saying I'm such a loser, you are connecting yourself with your soul when we even think that way.
Yeah. Well, could you tell us maybe a fun story of either yourself and or others, let's do both, please, in which people, in fact, did some Aristotle-style self-persuasion and were able to see some cool transformations from it?
Well, let's talk about me.
Oh, certainly.
And the reason why is I actually was skeptical about this very idea that I could use these tools of rhetoric for myself. Now, my background is as a journalist, so naturally I'm skeptical of everything. And I'm not just going to jump into stuff without really getting the facts straight. Well, how do I do that when I'm talking Aristotle? Well, what I did was I decided I would have a year-long experiment where I would try to convince myself to do something stupid and pointless and really, really hard and make myself believe that it was the most awesome thing I had ever done. I mean, there's a way to persuade myself. And then in order to accomplish that goal, I had to completely change my habits, my diet, my whole workout strategy, and all the rest. And what that was...
Stupid, pointless, and hard.
Stupid, pointless, hard. There's a book title for you. So what I did, and talk about my being a nerd in the truest Aristotelian sense, when I'm stuck on anything, my secret delight, not so secret now, is to go to the Oxford English Dictionary and just look words up. And I thought, I wonder if hyperbole is a trope. Now, why was I doing that? It was because I'm really interested in tropes, which change people's idea of reality. If somebody says, this is shovel ready. A project is shovel ready. That changes people's opinion of what that project might be. When we're going to invade a country, we talk about having boots on the ground. We're not throwing boots out of helicopters. Boots are involved, but not that directly.
Yeah, it's very visceral. You imagine, there's a shovel going into there, or there's people marching. Okay, I'm right with, or we're wheels up. It's like, okay, I got what you're saying. Not just we're kind of ready to go. It's like, no, straight up, the wheels are up.
You get it. Yeah. So it simplifies things, but at the same time, it changes your idea of what that even is, and it creates a kind of vision in your head. So I was wondering, isn't hyperbole that, in the sense that when someone exaggerates something, they start seeing something different. They start thinking bigger in a way, even while they're being skeptical about whether this thing is just exaggeration. So anyway, I look it up in the Oxford English Dictionary. And I knew that hyper comes from the Greek. It means above or beyond. What does bully mean? Well, it turns out it's where we get the word ball from. Now, talk about being a geek. I'm doing that right now. And it also means to throw. And I thought hyperbole means to throw beyond. And the Greeks were so good at this in coming up with things like, this is the trope that throws beyond things, goes farther. And I thought I had this instant image in my head of being like a dog who can throw its own ball. I was going to throw this ball into the distance and chase after it and see if I could catch it. And I thought right away, something I've always wanted to be able to do is to run my age up a particular mountain. There's a mountain in New Hampshire where Olympians test their oxygenation, their VO2, and their lactate removal and all that stuff.
Okay.
Only a dozen people had ever run their age up this mountain, which is running to the top of this 2,800 foot elevation gain, 3,800 foot mountain in 3.6 miles in fewer minutes than their olden years. In other words, if you go from the trailhead to the top of this mountain and you are 30 years old and you do it in 29 minutes, you have run your age, if that makes sense.
Better start soon.
No one over, yeah, exactly. And I'm way too old for, now the good news is the older you get, the more minutes you have to run this mountain. But no one had ever done it over age 50. And two physiologists had said they thought it was probably impossible, that your body can't remove the heat, the lactate, your VO2 is going to go lower from year to year. Plus, the power you need goes down pretty dramatically after age 30. They were telling me all this stuff about why it's impossible. And I thought, that's perfect. All I need to do is to convince myself in a way that makes me put in the effort. And if I don't achieve it, well, I have a great story. I'll still write a book about it. Well, so I spent the next year losing 28 pounds, and I was already fairly skinny. So I had less to hoist up the mountain. I was working out 4 hours a day. Our income went down dramatically along the way. And the whole time I was coming up with all these rhetorical strategies, these tools to convince myself that this is awesome, that I'm the kind of person who can do this. I actually reset my time zone so that I would start getting up at 4 a.m. in order to have the time to do this. I'm still in that time zone. I call it daylight saving. So the only problem with that is no one else is on the time zone except for my wife. So it makes me very boring at night. It's like, that's not my time zone. I'm not going to that party. But as a result, I ended up achieving more than I ever thought I could, in part because I was using all these very particular tools. And maybe we can talk about some of them. But I won't tell you whether I actually accomplished that goal. You have to read the book.
Okay. Oh, look at you now, master rhetorician. What do we call that? The withholding of something to stoke intense curiosity. There's got to be a word for that, Jay.
Well, in Greek, it's called the tease. No, that's English.
Okay, that's very straightforward. Jay, light savings time. Well, it's so funny. Boy, you say that challenge. I was like, this feels like this was made for Peter Attia to work on, if you know that guy.
Yeah.
So, understood. So, stupid, pointless, and hard. First, I got to double check that. When you first conceived of this, did a part of you light up like, oh, that'd be so awesome?
I have to admit, yes. I did, in part because I had, in my youth, up until mid 40s, been an avid trail runner. I mean, I love the outdoors. And I wasn't great at it. I was an enthusiast. And every year I had been the last person to run up Moosilauke on the annual time trial up the mountain. I was terrible. In fact, to show you what kind of an athlete I was, no one ever thought of me as an athlete until one day on that very mountain, the night before I had had a book come out. And friends held a book party for me to celebrate the publication. And late in the evening, a really good friend showed up with a bottle of scotch. I'd already had quite a bit of champagne. We killed that bottle of scotch at about 3 o'clock in the morning. And at 11 o'clock, I was running up or trying to run up this mountain. I actually made it to the top where I was violently ill. And the coach who was timing the finishers at the top, who knew me, came over and asked if I needed an evacuation. And I said, I've been evacuating all the way up the mountain. You don't want to go down that trail.
Hot dog.
And so all these amazing ex-Olympians afterward down at the base when I staggered back down holding my stomach, they had heard what I had done and they couldn't believe that I had done that much drinking almost all night and still got to the top of that mountain. They didn't care what my time was. From then on, they started inviting me to run with them, and I was like part of them. All of a sudden, I was an athlete, and it was because all I had accomplished was struggling up to the top. Now, I thought when I was reading the Oxford English Dictionary and thinking about hyperbole, I thought, what if I actually could do something truly athletic, like be the first geezer, old guy, to run his age up to that summit? And that became a different kind of goal. Now, why is this important in an Aristotelian sense? It's because my soul, my truest sense of self is an enthusiastic outdoorsman and the athlete I never was. And one of the things that Aristotle talks about is in order to be happy, you need to be able to separate your daily self from your truest self, your soul. In other words, all your bad habits aren't your truest self. Your good habits are. And what are they and how do you get there? Well, that's how you have this dialogue with your soul. And so I really was thinking about this immediately with that term hyperbole, to throw myself beyond. Well, who's myself and how am I throwing it? Well, my truest, deepest self is way better an athlete than I had ever proven myself to be with my daily habits. And that led to new daily habits that I continue to this day.
Well, 4 hours of training a day and substantial income sacrifice. First, got to ask, what did the wife think about this process?
My wife makes benefits. That helps a lot.
But she wasn't, she was encouraging you along the way?
She said the scariest 4 words I've ever heard when I told her what I wanted to do. She said, I believe in you.
Oh, wow.
And it was like, oh my God, now I really have to do it. And I have to do it well, so never mind my soul. It's my wife, for crying, my soulmate.
Yeah. So let's hear some of this rhetoric. I imagine there are days when you didn't feel like doing the training. What does one say to themselves in such situations?
Well, so one of the biggest things, Aristotle was the original and still the best, I think, philosopher of habit. And he kind of talked about how to do that. And one way to do that was he created what I call the lure and the ramp. The lure is something you really want, an outcome you would love to achieve or get. The ramp is this idea that you don't launch yourself into doing awesome push-ups right away or, working out for 4 hours for that matter. So the first thing I thought was, okay, I need time. I need to carve out a particular amount of time, and it's to be time for me, starting with 2 hours. And so I waited actually until the time zone changed to standard time from daylight saving, where the US government grants you and me with an extra hour every day before they take it away with daylight saving in the spring. So already, all I had to do was set my watch back or keep it the way it was, essentially, to get up the same time I had been getting up, regardless of what the time zone told me. And that already saved an hour. And then I ratcheted it up again another hour after a while. Now, I didn't start working out. I didn't start doing anything for meeting my goal of running up a mountain, except for reading. I read inspiring books about running and the outdoors and trail running and that sort of thing. And then I segue to harder books on physiology to see, what I could do. Not working out. Then gradually I got so bored with the physiology books that actually an indoor workout started sounding pretty good. And then after a while, I really wanted to go outside. So I started running outside with a headlamp in the early dark. And so just little by little, over a course of about 9 months, I finally built up to the full, brutal 4-hour-a-day schedule. That's the ramp. So that was one thing. Too many people do make this mistake when it comes to any kind of habit during the day, I think. One is they set their goals too low. When you hear about exercise from your doctor, the doctor is so used to patients just not doing anything they're supposed to do. They'll say, walk 20 minutes a day. It won't do a lot of good, but it's better than nothing. That's all you might be able to do if I can get you to do that. Or other people will set unrealistic goals and then launch into them immediately and realize how hard it is. And every time they reach a setback, they decide they're incapable of it. And that's where the ramp really can come in. So one of the things I encourage people for any new habit that's going to take time, carve out the time. And one way to do that is to think, what's the most wasted time of the day? And for me, it was watching videos at night, like total waste of my time. Plus, the streaming services now kind of suck. The content has gotten worse.
You've already seen all the good shows.
Exactly. And after COVID, they stopped making a lot of them. So anyway, carve out that time by simply going to bed earlier and getting up earlier. And I decided to glamorize the whole thing by calling it daylight saving, my very own time zone. That's one thing, the time and then just gradually building up. Now, you mentioned what happens if you're kind of stuck and you just can't motivate yourself. I was almost ashamed to write about this because I was reading also a lot of neurology books, talking to expert brain and mind experts, and reading a lot of journals to see, where rhetoric intersects with science, which I've been doing for many years. And about affirmations, the things you tell yourself. Actually, they work. And I wanted to come up with this innovative new stuff. But one of the best things to do was I deliberately came up with stupid expressions that I knew would embarrass to say them aloud. And I would say them aloud. Again, this is a way to kind of talk myself into believing things.
Is it more helpful if they're stupid?
I mean, yes, in one sense. There's this concept that Aristotle wrote about called receptivity, and modern behaviorists call it cognitive ease. And if you're smiling, you're more persuadable. If you can get people, see, I'm persuading you right now, you're smiling. So saying something stupid can make you smile, even if it's an embarrassed smile. And that actually kind of changes the brain and makes you more receptive to new information or new ideas. Now, here's the other thing I discovered, though, which is the ancients had this expression that's very rhythmic called the paean, which now means, song of praise or a speech that praises somebody. But what it originally was a god of healing or a god that protected all the other gods on Olympus or wherever. And soldiers, as they were running into battle with their spears and shields and everything, would pray to the god Paean to protect them. And at the time, they believed that if you did it with a kind of rhythm, the way a lot of our prayers and hymns are now in, say, church, it would work better. The god would listen if we did it with a rhythm. Later, Cicero, the Roman rhetorician and orator, said what that rhythm was. And it was like this combination of short and long syllables. I know this is getting in the weeds, but it really worked for me because if I could do things that maybe rhymed or had a particular rhythm, it would work better. And if you look at Madison Avenue of slogans, and by the way, those Paean war cries became known as slogans, which was the war chant was originally a slogan. If you look at corporate slogans today, bet you can't eat just one. That is a perfect paean. That has the same rhythm as what apparently ancient Greeks were running in a battle to murder each other, saying aloud, same kind of rhythm. Now, I did that saying to myself, I'm strong and light and taking flight. And a bunch of other things I did. And what I did was I repeated them over and over and over and over again. And my legs love rocks. I flow up rocks. And I would do that. And the repetition itself strengthens the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain that interprets reality. In other words, you can literally change the reality in your head through repetition.
Yeah. Well, so give us, I bet you can't eat just one. Give us a few more examples so we can feel that rhythmic groove as we're crafting our own.
New York Times, all the news that's fit to print. Bounty, the quicker picker-upper. So it's a combination of short and long syllables, and you don't have to get too precise to do it. I mean, what Cicero said was it should be a combination of short and long syllables. I see no evidence in science, not that it's been tested that much. But yeah, I mean, the idea is to come up with something that sounds rhythmic, and rhyming can help as well, that gets you out of a daily pattern of speech. I think that's what it's really about. It's got to sound kind of different and weird in a way, and that makes it stickier.
Yeah, boy, this is reminding me of so many random little tidbits. And I'm thinking about Cal Newport, guest of the show, Deep Work. He says something kind of silly at the end of his workday as he's sort of like wrapping up, finishing the last emails, shutting down the computer. And he says something like, I think even robotic, like, shutdown sequence complete. And so it's goofy, but sure enough, it has cemented that habitual work groove of, and I don't check my devices after work. I'm with my family, I'm doing things, and it's working fantastically for me.
That is a PM. Shutdown system complete. That is a PM. So the nerdiest basketball fans are in the Ivy League. If you watch an Ivy League basketball game, you'll hear people yell the perfect PN. Repel them, make them relinquish the ball.
Relinquish. A lot of syllables.
And that is really like shutdown, system complete. It's a same kind of thing. And I bet it does him wonders when he does that. It makes him feel as if he has truly accomplished something during the day.
I'm also thinking about how we had Dr. Stephen C. Hayes, who's famous for promulgating ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy, talks about these words, phrases, diffusion, he calls the practice. If you say a word over and over again, or put it to music, it sort of changes your emotional relationship to that. Or if you replace it with something. And he also mentions about perfectionism. Often when we do something, we if you struggle with perfectionism, it's like you hear the critique of someone else's voice about how you're doing it wrong or not up to their standards. This is recent, and talk about the silly things we do. Before, I used to get in this mental habit loop, which is not at all productive, where I'd hear some other voice criticizing me for something. And then I would sort of like get defensive, like, well, no, it's necessary because of this and this and this. I'm not concerned with that right now. And right now the focus is that whatever. And so then you get kind of worked up, right? It's like you're having an argument with nobody. And so now I've recently decided just to be silly with it. I sing, and if I hear that critical voice, I respond with the song The Reason by Hoobastank, because I thought it was just sort of cheesy lyrics. I'm not a perfect person. There's many things I wish I didn't do. And it just makes me chuckle, like, that's silly. And then I can just move on much faster. So you're really connecting some dots in terms of if we make it silly and repetitive, we really do have a different internal emotional response, which flows into downstream results.
And not only that, but it slightly shifts your whole idea of reality and your own identity when you do that. And that there's lots of science that backs this up. So the idea that you're singing something really silly, I mean, to me, the pointless and stupid part of the goal was partly responsible for my believing that I could achieve it. Because it wasn't just like, it's impossible, it's physically impossible. Who am I? I'm no physiologist. Physiologists tell me I can't do this. And yet, if when I smiled thinking about it, it made all the difference. The other thing is, you mentioned perfectionism. And one of the things I was deliberately trying to do was to factor in failure. And so the question was, is this goal so awesome that I can fail up? That suppose I was 58 years old when I attempted this run up the mountain. I did it on a single day, which happened to be my birthday, where I gained an extra minute to run up this mountain overnight. I had an extra minute. And I thought, if I run it in like 59 or 60 minutes, does that make me a bad person? That is a really good time to run up that mountain. And I thought, yes, it would be a failure. I would not have achieved my goal of running my age. I couldn't brag about being the 13th person in history ever to do it. On the other hand, it's pretty awesome. And I think that that's something when you create, I actually talk about a capital H hyperbole. Like, what's your hyperbole? What do you want to do? And it could be, it doesn't have to do with athletics or anything. It could be learning a musical instrument and then heading to Paris and busking on the streets, or, learning how to cook for the very first time and serving this amazing meal to a crowd of people you don't know. Something that just sounds ridiculous and impossible. But, the whole idea of what your hyperbole is ought to build to, all right, if the dish fails, if you can't get on the streets, if nobody throws money into your hat or whatever on the streets when you're singing, is that a failure? Yeah, it is. You have to recognize that. But it also gives you a very different opinion of what failure is. You're so much better than you were before.
Yes, I like that a lot. And it's, as opposed to some failures, is like, well, now I'm in a tight spot because I risked all my money on that venture. Whoopsies.
Yeah. Well, and there is a matter of framing. That's another rhetorical tool that I found to be hugely important. So, which is, all right, what is that tight spot really? And what is there to be gained from that spot? Such as, this is not a failed company, it's an education. And it's I would have spent that much on college. I mean, that would be one way to reframe it. In my case, early on, one of the problems I had when I planned to run my age up this mountain was I was having trouble walking. I had this terrible ailment called snapping hip syndrome, an extreme version of it, where your iliotibial band, the tendon that runs up your leg into your hip, was catching on the hip bone on both sides. And when it did that, it would I'd literally fall to the ground. The first time it ever happened, I was actually in a meeting back when I had a legitimate job as a manager. I was chairing this meeting. I get up at the end of it. I literally fell to the floor, and I had to go to do a presentation. My staff ran out and bought me a cane. How embarrassing is this? The cab driver, this is pre-Uber, helped me into the cab. And then I sort of limped on one foot into this client's meeting where I had to do this presentation in severe pain. So sometime, nothing worked, by the way, to get me past this. And my doctor said, I know a guy, who might do something with you. And this doctor had only performed this experimental procedure once. And he said, hey, you got nothing else? You want to try it? Sure, I said. And it had to do with several hundred shots of dextrose, sugar water, in my hips and buttocks. 150 shots the first time to sort of flood the zone of the nerves, so that what was happening is, and this is common with a lot of hip problems, the pain causes your muscles to tighten up. And when they tighten up, that pulls the tendon even tighter. So in order to get me to be less tight, he had to cause severe pain over and over again. It actually worked. But as I'm lying there, I started thinking, this isn't just painful. It's not PT. This is part of my training. This is the first part of my training. This is what's going to get me up the mountain. I also thought, I went back to what I had learned from the ancients, who said that suffering is a skill. Suffering is not something that you feel sorry for yourself for. it's something you can feel proud of because you can get through it. You can overcome it. And the more pain and setbacks in your life, the more that proves what your soul really is. And I was thinking, I can get through this. I'm pretty good at pain, even while I'm practically crying. I'm saying to myself, I'm really good at withstanding pain. And running up a mountain is a very painful thing to do. This is preparing me for it. All this is reframing, changing the definition of what the issue is.
Thank you. Well, I'd also be curious if we're having some internal dialogue that sounds sort of like impostery sort of vibes, imposter syndrome, like who are you to think that you can possibly blah, 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 blah. What would be the self-persuasion approach to tackle those?
Aristotle would say to think analogously, which is to compare one thing that you can do with something that you don't think you can and find that there's a connection there. So, for example, the first time I ever took on a really big management job where I was responsible for a total of 300 people, and I am an off-the-charts introvert. I actually don't like managing people. So this seemed not me in any way. And I thought, well, what is managing people? What does that start with? It really starts with a kind of organization and getting people to understand that what the organization is, how all the parts fit together as a kind of system. If people buy into that, they can feel part of something larger than themselves. I will never write a business book about this, but that was the way I was thinking at the time. And I thought the problem is I'm not that systematic a guy, and I have no idea where to start with this job. But then I thought, other than napping, my greatest skill is loading dishwashers. I am really proud of it. Ridiculous as it is, I'm proud of it. And I thought, that's organization. I know how things move together with different shapes. And I thought, this is what management is. It's dealing with people with different personalities and skill sets. And sometimes people are in the wrong place. Sometimes they need to be moved around a bit, or maybe their purpose has to change or whatever. And that's just dishes in a dishwasher. Now, it's not. But the fact that I started thinking that way, that help me overcome my imposter syndrome. Because I was thinking, you don't suck at organization. You're really good at it. And just keep repeating that to yourself. Think dishwasher and you're good to go. That's my belief.
Okay, beautiful. Well, Jay, tell me anything else you want to make sure to mention before we hear about your favorite things.
Let's just talk about my favorite things.
Okay. Big thanks to Jay for sharing his wisdom with us. And big thanks to our sponsors. Check them out. One sponsored checkout is strawberry.me Career Coaching. Having real clarity and direction can make or break your career. If it seems like you're putting in the work but not seeing your career take off, some coaching might be just the ticket. Strawberry.me matches you with certified career coaches who help you gain clarity on what you really want next in your career, develop a results-driven strategy, and stay accountable. And they can also help you flourish beyond career issues. I had a fantastic session with my coach, Brett, about handling stress from so many responsibilities in so many areas. He was fun. He was wise. He just really got me. We had some laughs and a good time and a good rapport. And he gave me an exercise that has been so quick and so effective for me. I've been doing it every day. So if you're ready to take control and build momentum in your career, go to strawberry.me/awesome to claim your $50 credit. That's strawberry.me/awesome. Because awesome careers don't just happen, you make them happen. One sponsored checkout is Vanguard. For all the financial advisors listening, let's talk bonds for a minute. Capturing value in fixed income is not easy. Bond markets are massive, murky, and a lot of firms will just throw a couple flashy funds your way and call it a day. But not Vanguard. Vanguard bonds provide top-grade products across the board. Their lineup includes over 80 bond funds actively managed by a 200-person global squad of sector specialists, analysts, and traders. Vanguard's been in the game for a long time at a scale that gives them a serious edge. They're able to invest across many sectors, maturities, and geographies, spotting opportunities that others might miss. Vanguard takes a steady approach, focusing on reliability and consistency. So if you're looking to give your clients consistent results year in and year out, go see the record for yourself at vanguard.com/audio. That's vanguard.com/audio. All investing is subject to risk. Vanguard Marketing Corporation, distributor.
This message comes from Capital One. The Capital One Venture X Business Card has no preset spending limit, so the card's purchasing power can adapt to meet business needs. Plus, the card earns unlimited double miles on every purchase, so the more a business spends, the more miles earned. And when traveling, the Venture X Business Card grants access to over 1,000 airport lounges. The Venture X Business Card. What's in your wallet? Terms and conditions apply. Find out more at CapitalOne.com/VentureXBusiness.
Can you share a favorite quote, something you find inspiring?
Audi altem parteram, which means hear the other side.
Mm-hmm. And a favorite book?
I listen to nonfiction audiobooks, and the one I'm totally in love with, I had never gotten around, is The Boys in the Boat, about this rowing team in the Berlin Olympics in 1938 of these ne'er-do-wells who won the gold medal. And it is a book about not just teamwork, but goal setting and motivation. I think anybody who works for a living should read this book, especially if they want to become a manager. It's absolutely, it's a page turner, though it's an audiobook.
All right. And a favorite tool, something you use to be awesome at your job?
The biggest go-to I hear from my readers is the idea of paying attention to whatever tense you're in, especially in a difficult conversation. So you want to be able to switch, to pivot the tense to the future, because the past has to do with blame and mistakes that were made or that never worked. The present has to do with good and bad and who's good and who's bad. It's where you get a lot of name calling going on and tribes forming. If you can say, let's switch to the future. Let's talk about how we're going to solve this problem. Good things happen.
Mm-hmm. And a favorite habit?
Daylight saving, man. Just become very unpopular in the evening, but accomplish goals in the morning.
Okay. And if folks want to learn more, get in touch, where would you point them?
I'm on Substack like so many people, but I do a weekly email about motivation and persuasion, that sort of thing. I have a website, jayheinrichs.com. And then you'll find me in all the fine social media places.
And do you have a final challenge or call to action for folks looking to be awesome at their jobs?
I would encourage that idea of time zones. Like, create your own. I'm serious about this. It's the single thing that changed my life the most. And I think I would have been better back when I had legitimate jobs if I had done that.
All right. Jay, thank you.
Pete, it's such a pleasure. I love talking with you. Let's wait less than 9 years.
I'm in, yes. I really appreciated Jay's take on making affirmations silly. And I have adopted this, and sure enough, I do find I am more receptive and more believing the things I say when they're a little goofy. Maybe they've got a voice, maybe they've got some gestures, maybe they've got some rhyme, and a smile is on my face, and I believe it. So bring some silly in and reap the benefits. Great stuff from Jay. If you want to check out the show notes or the transcript or the links to items that we've referenced, please drop on by awesomeatyourjob.com/EP1098. Hope to catch you next time, and peace.